The rain came down like the sky itself was grieving. Daniel Carter pulled his old pickup truck to the side of the road, not because he wanted to, not because he had anywhere near enough time or energy left in his bones after a 14-hour day at the shop, but because he saw her, a woman standing alone in the downpour beside a broken-down luxury car, her arms wrapped around herself, completely drenched, looking like someone who had never once in her life expected the world to leave her stranded. And Daniel Carter, despite everything life had taken from him, had never been able to drive past someone in need. His daughter called it his superpower. He called it the only thing his father had ever given him worth keeping. If you believe that one small act of kindness can change 2 lives forever, then this story was written for you. Please like this video, drop a comment below telling us what kindness means to you, share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because in a world that moves too fast, we think stories like this one matter. Daniel had been running on fumes for 3 years straight. Ever since Sarah passed, quietly, terribly, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and false hope, he had become 2 people inside one exhausted body. By day he was the mechanic, the business owner, the man who fixed what was broken for anyone who walked through the rusted door of Carter's auto repair. By night he was Emma's dad, helping with homework at the kitchen table, braiding hair badly but trying anyway, reading bedtime stories in a voice that cracked sometimes when he thought she wasn't listening. Emma was 7 years old and she had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and she was, without question, the only reason Daniel remembered to eat most days. The shop was barely surviving. 3 of his 4 lifts needed servicing he couldn't afford. His best mechanic had left for a dealership job with benefits Daniel couldn't match. The landlord had raised the rent twice in 18 months, and the small business loan he'd taken out to keep the lights on was now a weight he carried in his chest every single morning when he opened his eyes. He had applied for a larger contract with a local fleet company, submitted every form, attended every meeting, smiled until his face ached, and last Tuesday, they had chosen someone else. That rejection letter was still sitting on his passenger seat, folded in thirds, like a small paper monument to everything that wasn't working. So when he climbed out of his truck that stormy night and walked toward the woman by the broken Bentley, he wasn't doing it because his life had room for heroics. He was doing it because somewhere deep underneath the exhaustion and the grief and the quiet financial terror, Daniel Carter was still the kind of man who stopped. Her name was Vivian Hale. She told him that later, after he had already spent 40 minutes in the rain diagnosing a fuel pump failure and calling his buddy Marcus at the garage to bring out a temporary fix. In those first minutes she said almost nothing, just watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between suspicion and a kind of stunned relief. She was dressed for a board meeting or a gala, not for standing on a rural highway in a November storm, and there was something in the careful way she held herself, even soaking wet, that told Daniel she was someone who had spent years making sure no one ever saw her uncertain. He didn't ask questions. He just worked. He talked to her the way he talked to Emma when his daughter was upset, not pushing, not fixing, just filling the silence with something warm. He told her the rain would let up by morning. He told her the Bentley was a beautiful machine and whoever had been servicing it had been cutting corners on the fuel system for at least 2 years. He said it without judgment, just as fact, the way a doctor reads an X-ray. And something about that, his calm, his competence, his complete absence of anything wanting from her, made Vivian Hale's shoulders drop about 2 inches from where they'd been hovering near her ears. Marcus arrived. They got the car running enough to drive carefully to the nearest proper garage. Daniel followed behind in his truck to make sure she made it. When they finally pulled under the fluorescent lights of the covered station and the mechanic on duty took over, Vivian turned to Daniel in the harsh light and he saw, for the first time, that she had been crying. Not from the rain. The rain had stopped 20 minutes ago. These were different tears, old ones, the kind that had been waiting a long time for a moment quiet enough to fall. She told him she had just come from her father's lawyer's office. That her father had died 6 weeks ago and left behind a company she hadn't spoken to him about in years, and a letter she still hadn't been able to finish reading. She told him she didn't know why she was telling him this. He told her it was probably because he was a stranger and strangers were sometimes easier. She laughed at that, a real laugh, short and surprised, and Daniel felt something shift inside him, some tectonic thing that had been frozen solid for 3 years. They exchanged numbers because her car would need a proper fuel pump and she said she wanted Carter's auto repair to do the work. He told her he appreciated the business and tried to keep his voice completely professional. He drove home in the dark and sat in his driveway for 10 minutes before going inside, listening to the rain start again on the roof of the cab, feeling something he didn't have a name for yet. Over the following weeks, Vivian brought the Bentley in. Then she came back with questions, first about the car, then about the shop, then about Emma, whose drawing was taped to the wall above Daniel's desk, a crayon portrait of a man and a little girl standing in front of a building labeled in large uncertain letters, Daddy's Shop. Vivian stared at that drawing for a long time without saying anything. Daniel pretended not to notice. She was, it turned out, the new acting director of her father's company, a mid-sized logistics firm with a fleet of 43 vehicles and a service contract up for renewal. She could not, she was careful to explain, promise him anything, and she would not be the only voice in the decision, and the process was formal and competitive and she would recuse herself from any final vote. But she could make sure Carter's auto repair was on the list. She could make sure the proposal got a fair read. Daniel thanked her quietly and submitted the most thorough bid document he had ever written, working on it every night after Emma went to sleep, until the words blurred and his coffee went cold. The contract came through on a Wednesday morning. Daniel was under a Chevy Silverado when Marcus knocked on the frame of the lift and slid the email printout across the floor to him. He read it lying on his back with oil on his hands and tears running sideways into his hair, and he thought about a stormy night and a woman in a red shirt standing in the rain, and about his daughter's superpower theory, and about how sometimes the things that save you don't look like rescue, they look like stopping when you didn't have to. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that ordinary people doing ordinary good things can change the entire direction of a life, please tell us in the comments. Write one word that describes how this story made you feel. Just one word. We read every single one. And before we go, drop a comment if you've ever had a stranger show up for you exactly when you needed it most. Those moments deserve to be remembered. Those people deserve to be honored. Even if it's just 2 sentences. Even if it was a long time ago. Daniel Carter never stopped because he expected anything in return. He stopped because that was who he was. And in the end, that was everything.